The train whistle pierced the still Montana air as Nora Vance clutched her well-worn valise to her chest, heart thundering with both anticipation and fear. The year was 1876, and after 3 months of correspondence with Elijah Payton, she had finally arrived in Independence, Montana, to become his wife, only to be greeted by a station master with sympathetic eyes and devastating news. "Miss Vance, I'm afraid I have terrible news. Mr. Payton passed away 3 days ago. Influenza took him quick-like." The platform seemed to tilt beneath Nora's feet as she struggled to comprehend the words. She had left everything behind in Boston: her job as a seamstress, her tiny rented room, and what little security she had known to marry a man she'd never met. Now he was gone, and she was alone in a strange frontier town with nothing but $12 to her name and a trunk full of modest possessions. "I'm so sorry, miss," the station master continued, his weathered face creased with genuine concern. "If you'd like, I can arrange passage back east on tomorrow's train." Nora swallowed hard, trying to maintain her composure. At 22 years of age, she had already weathered more storms than most. The loss of her parents, the struggle to survive in a city that cared little for a woman alone, but this blow threatened to break her entirely. Her voice faltered. "I don't have funds for return passage." The admission cost her dearly in pride, but it was the simple truth. As the station master fumbled for a response, a deep voice spoke from behind her. "Miss Vance." Nora turned to see a tall man silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. He stepped forward, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind, with piercing blue eyes that studied her with careful assessment. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the edges of his collar, and though he wasn't dressed in the finery she'd seen on Boston gentlemen, there was an undeniable dignity to his bearing. "I'm Isaac Yates," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "I ranch adjacent to what was Payton's property. I was a friend of his. I'm mighty sorry about your situation." Nora drew herself up straighter, unwilling to appear as desperate as she felt. "Thank you, Mr. Yates, but I'll manage." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I don't doubt that, madam, but there's no hotel in Independence, and the boarding house is full up with railroad workers." He hesitated, then continued. "Elijah spoke highly of you in his letters. He was making preparations for your arrival right up until he fell ill." The mention of Elijah's anticipation caused her throat to tighten. She'd never meet the man who'd written such thoughtful, hopeful letters. "I have a proposition," Isaac continued. "My sister Ruth lived with me until her marriage last spring. Her room stands empty. You're welcome to stay there until you decide your next step. It would be the neighborly thing to do." Nora's pride warred with practicality. "I couldn't impose. It's no imposition. And I reckon Elijah would haunt me proper if I left his intended to fend for herself." His expression softened. "It's a respectable offer, Miss Vance. My housekeeper, Mrs. Donovan, lives on the property. Your reputation would remain intact." The station master nodded encouragingly. "Mr. Yates is good people, miss. One of the most respected ranchers in these parts." Nora studied Isaac Yates more carefully. There was nothing in his demeanor that suggested ulterior motives, only a straightforward offer of assistance that she desperately needed. "Very well, Mr. Yates. I accept your kind offer. Temporarily, of course." "Of course," he agreed, picking up her trunk with ease. "My wagon's just outside." The ride to the Yates ranch was quiet, with Nora taking in the vast Montana landscape that was so different from the crowded streets of Boston. Rolling hills stretched toward distant mountains, the late June sun casting long shadows across the grasslands. "I'm sorry for your loss," Isaac said finally, breaking the silence. I know you didn't know Elijah in person, but losing the future you'd planned is still a grievous thing. His perception startled her. Yes, it is. Thank you for understanding that. She paused. Were you and Mr. Payton close friends? Neighbors more than friends, I suppose. But out here, good neighbors matter. He glanced at her. Elijah was excited about your coming. Said you were smart as a whip and determined. Showed me your letters once or twice. Heat rose to Nora's cheeks at the thought of this stranger reading her words. I see. Nothing improper, he assured her quickly. He was proud, is all, wanted someone to share his happiness with. The simple statement made her heart ache anew for the man she would never know. As they crested a hill, Isaac pointed ahead. That's my place. Nora's eyes widened. She had expected something modest, but the Yates ranch was substantial, a large two-story house with a wide porch, several outbuildings and corrals filled with horses. In the distance, cattle grazed on the rolling plains. It's bigger than I anticipated, she admitted. Started with nothing 10 years ago, he said without pride, just stating a fact. Built it up acre by acre, cow by cow. As they approached the house, a middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Mrs. Donovan, Isaac called out, we have a guest who will be staying with us for a spell. This is Miss Nora Vance, who was to marry Elijah Payton. Mrs. Donovan's face immediately softened with sympathy. Oh, you poor dear. Come in, come in. You must be exhausted after such a journey and then to receive such terrible news. For the first time since hearing of Elijah's death, Nora felt tears threatening. The simple kindness was almost her undoing after holding herself together for so long. Isaac carried her trunk upstairs to a pleasant room with simple but comfortable furnishings. A patchwork quilt covered the bed, and lace curtains framed a window that overlooked the property. Ruth's room, he explained. Mrs. Donovan keeps it ready for when she visits. He set down the trunk and stepped back toward the door. Supper's at 6. Take some time to rest if you need it. Mr. Yates, Nora called as he turned to leave. I want you to know I don't intend to be a burden. I'll earn my keep while I'm here. Something that might have been admiration flickered in his eyes. I don't doubt that for a minute, Miss Vance. After he left, Nora sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself a moment of grief not just for Elijah, but for herself and the future that had evaporated before it could begin. Supper that evening was a quiet affair. Mrs. Donovan had prepared a hearty meal of beef stew, biscuits, and apple pie that would have fed twice their number. Isaac's foreman, a weathered man named Franklin Cooper, joined them, tipping his hat respectfully to Nora before taking his seat. Miss Vance, if you don't mind my asking, what skills do you bring with you? Mrs. Donovan inquired as they ate. I was a seamstress in Boston, Nora replied. I also kept books for the shop owner and can read and write well enough. Isaac looked up from his plate. That's fortunate. Independence is growing with the railroad coming through. Several new businesses have opened, and they might need someone with your skills. I intend to inquire tomorrow, Nora said firmly. I appreciate your hospitality, Mr. Yates, but I don't plan to impose for long. No rush, he said simply. Take the time you need. Later that night, unable to sleep, Nora crept downstairs for a glass of water. She found Isaac at the kitchen table, a ledger open before him, a lamp casting his face in warm light. I'm sorry to disturb you, she said quickly. He looked up, seemingly unsurprised by her presence. No disturbance, can't sleep. It's been a rather overwhelming day. He nodded, closing the ledger. I imagine so. Would you like some tea? Mrs. Donovan always leaves the kettle ready. That's kind, but I don't want to keep you from your work. Just finishing up. He stood and moved to the stove with an ease that suggested he was accustomed to managing without help. Ranch accounts never seem to balance themselves, no matter how much I wish they would. As he prepared the tea, Nora found herself studying him more carefully. Isaac Yates wasn't handsome in the conventional sense that she was accustomed to in Boston, but there was something compelling about his features, strength in the line of his jaw, intelligence in his eyes, and a quiet confidence in his movements. "How long have you lived in Independence?" she asked, accepting the cup he offered. "Since '66, right after the war." He settled back into his chair. "Came west with nothing but determination and a stubborn refusal to die. You fought in the war, Union cavalry, saw more than I care to remember." His face closed briefly, suggesting memories he didn't share easily. Montana was a fresh start. "I understand the appeal of fresh starts," Nora admitted, thinking of her own journey. "Boston held too many difficult memories after my parents died." "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, and she could tell he meant it. "Family is precious out here. Their absence is felt keenly." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, each lost in thought. "Mr. Yates, may I ask you something about Elijah Payton?" "Of course." "What kind of man was he, truly?" "His letters were kind and thoughtful, but letters can't tell the whole story of a person." Isaac considered the question carefully. "Elijah was hardworking, honest to a fault, not the type to frequent saloons or cause trouble. He was building something worth having, a modest ranch, but growing steadily." He paused. "He was lonely, though. Lost his wife 5 years back to childbed fever. The baby, too. It broke something in him for a long while." Nora absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with the optimistic tone of Elijah's letters. "He never mentioned that." "Some wounds are too deep for paper," Isaac said quietly. "But he was healing, Miss Vance. Your letters helped with that. I saw hope in him again these past months." The knowledge that she had brought comfort to a man she would never meet was both painful and oddly comforting. "Thank you for telling me," she said, rising from her seat. "And thank you for the tea. I should try to sleep now." "Of course. Good night, Miss Vance." "Good night, Mr. Yates." As she climbed the stairs back to her room, Nora found herself wondering what sort of man would offer shelter to a stranger out of respect for a neighbor. In Boston, such kindness would have been suspect. Here, it seemed, different rules applied. Morning brought clarity and purpose. After a breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits prepared by Mrs. Donovan, Nora asked Isaac if he might take her into town. "I need to see Mr. Payton's property," she explained, "and inquire about work in Independence." "I can do better than that," Isaac replied. "I'm heading to the property today anyway. Promised Elijah I'd look after his livestock until matters were settled." The mention of matters reminded Nora of something she hadn't yet considered. "Mr. Yates, what will happen to Mr. Payton's ranch now that he's gone? Did he have family?" "No kin that anyone knows of. The lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, is handling things. You might want to speak with him while we're in town." An hour later, they were riding toward Independence, this time in a buggy rather than the wagon. The town was smaller than Nora had imagined: a main street with a general store, a saloon, a small church, and a handful of other establishments. A new building was under construction, and the railroad station where she'd arrived yesterday stood at the far end of the street. "It's growing," Isaac explained, noting her assessment. "The Northern Pacific coming through has changed things. A year ago, half these buildings weren't here." Their first stop was the law office of Theodore Hargrove, a bespectacled man with a carefully trimmed beard who received them in a small but tidy office. "Miss Vance," he said, rising from behind his desk, "I was informed of your arrival. Please accept my condolences on the passing of Mr. Payton." Thank you, sir. Mr. Yates suggested I speak with you regarding Mr. Payton's estate. Yes, quite right. Hargrove shuffled through some papers. The situation is somewhat unusual. Mr. Payton updated his will just last month after your agreement to come west and marry him. This caught Nora by surprise. He did, indeed. He specified that should anything happen to him before your wedding, his property, the ranch, livestock, and personal effects would pass to you, provided you had indeed made the journey as agreed. Nora stared at the lawyer in disbelief. That can't be right. We weren't even married. Nevertheless, that was his wish. He was quite explicit about it. Hargrove adjusted his spectacles. He mentioned that you had given up your livelihood and security to come west on his word, and he wouldn't have that sacrifice be in vain. Isaac cleared his throat. That sounds like Elijah. He was a man of his word. Nora's mind raced. But I know nothing about running a ranch. I've never even seen the property. That can be remedied, Isaac said quietly. As for running it, decisions don't need to be made immediately. Hargrove nodded. Indeed. The will is quite clear, however. Once probate is complete, which should take only a few weeks given the straightforward nature of the bequest, the property will be yours to do with as you see fit. Sell it, keep it, or make other arrangements. Nora felt overwhelmed. Yesterday she'd been destitute in a strange town. Today she was apparently a property owner. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had come to independence to be a wife, only to find herself a widow of sorts before she'd even had a chance to be a bride. "Thank you, Mr. Hargrove," she said finally. "I'll need time to consider this unexpected development." After leaving the lawyer's office, Isaac guided the buggy out of town toward what was now, apparently, her property. They traveled for about 4 miles before turning onto a narrow track that led to a modest but well-maintained cabin with a barn and corral nearby. Several horses raised their heads at their approach, and a small herd of cattle grazed in a fenced pasture beyond. "It's not large," Isaac explained as he helped her down from the buggy, but Elijah managed it well. 20 head of cattle, 6 horses, and about 80 acres. The soil's good for growing, too. Nora approached the cabin with a sense of unreality. This was to have been her home, shared with a husband she would now never know. Isaac unlocked the door and stepped back to let her enter first. The interior was simple but comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with a cast iron stove, a small table with 2 chairs, and a rocking chair near the hearth. A door led to what she assumed was a bedroom. Everything was neat and clean, with a masculine simplicity that spoke of a man who lived alone but took pride in his surroundings. On the mantel above the fireplace, Nora noticed a framed photograph of a young woman with a gentle smile. Elijah's first wife, she presumed. "Sarah," Isaac confirmed, noting her gaze. She was a fine woman. Her passing nearly destroyed him. Nora felt a pang of something like jealousy, which was ridiculous given the circumstances. He must have loved her very much. He did. But he was ready to love again, Miss Vance. Your letters proved that. She turned away from the photograph, suddenly overwhelmed by the intimacy of being in a dead man's home, a home that was now, apparently, hers. "I don't know what to do with any of this," she admitted. Isaac's expression was understanding. "You don't need to decide today. Or tomorrow. Take the time you need. The animals need tending now, though. I'll see to them for the time being. Already have been since Elijah fell ill." She studied him more carefully. "Why are you being so kind, Mr. Yates? You barely know me." He considered her question seriously. "Partly for Elijah's sake. Partly because out here we look after our own, and partly—" he hesitated. "Partly because I know what it's like to arrive somewhere with nothing and no one." His honesty disarmed her. "Thank you. I'm grateful, truly." But I can't keep imposing on your generosity indefinitely. It's no imposition, and now that you own this property, you have options. Options that require knowledge I don't possess, she pointed out. Knowledge can be gained, Miss Vance. His blue eyes held her steadily. If you're willing to learn. There was something in his gaze that made her heart beat a little faster, a recognition, perhaps, of a similar stubborn determination that had brought them both to this remote place. I've never backed down from a challenge, Mr. Yates. A smile cracked his serious expression. Somehow that doesn't surprise me in the least. Over the following days, Nora fell into a routine. Mornings were spent at the Yates ranch, where Mrs. Donovan was teaching her the particulars of frontier cooking and housekeeping skills that differed considerably from city living. Afternoons, Isaac would take her to Elijah's property, her property, where she was learning the basics of ranch management. The key to cattle is water and good grazing, Isaac explained on the fourth day as they rode the perimeter of the smaller ranch. He'd lent her a gentle mare named Daisy, and though Nora had never ridden before coming west, she was determined to master this essential skill. Elijah had good water rights to the creek that runs through the north section. That's valuable. Nora absorbed this information, adding it to the growing store of knowledge she was accumulating. She'd learned to identify the different breeds of cattle, to recognize signs of illness in the animals, and to understand the rhythm of ranch work through the seasons. The cattle will need to be moved to the upper pasture soon, she noted, recalling yesterday's lesson. Isaac looked pleased. That's right. The lower grass is nearly grazed out. And we should check the fence line on the western border. I noticed some loose posts yesterday. We can do that tomorrow, he agreed, and Nora felt a small glow of pride at his approval. As they rode back toward the cabin, a movement near the tree line caught her attention. Mr. Yates, there's someone there. Isaac's hand moved instinctively to the rifle in his saddle holster, but he relaxed as the figure emerged fully from the trees. It's just Billy Two Eagles. He works for me occasionally. The young Native American man approached on foot, raising a hand in greeting. Mr. Yates, miss. He nodded respectfully to Nora. Billy, this is Miss Vance. She's the new owner of this property. Madam, Billy acknowledged. I was checking the trap lines and saw riders. Wanted to make sure it wasn't trouble. Appreciate that, Isaac said. Any luck with the traps? 2 beaver and a marten. Good pelts. Billy's dark eyes assessed Nora with quiet curiosity. You planning to stay on the land, Miss Vance? I haven't decided yet, she admitted. I'm still learning what that would entail, Billy nodded. This is good land. Elijah Payton respected it. Not all white men do. Billy's grandfather was Blackfoot, Isaac explained. His mother married a trapper. He knows this country better than most. It's an honor to meet you, Nora said sincerely. I would value any knowledge you might share about this land. Something in Billy's expression shifted slightly, approval perhaps. The creek to the north floods in spring. Elijah built the cabin here because it's high ground. He paused. There are 3 beaver dams along the creek. They help control the water. Some men tear them out for easier trapping. Elijah never did. Nora absorbed this information, recognizing it as the valuable insight it was. Thank you. I'll remember that. After Billy departed, continuing on his way with a silent nod, Nora turned to Isaac. There's so much to learn. Yes, he agreed, but you're learning faster than most. You have a good mind for details. His compliment warmed her more than it should have. Over the past days, she had found herself increasingly aware of Isaac Yates, the strength in his hands as he repaired fencing, the quiet authority with which he managed his ranch, the surprising gentleness he showed to animals and children alike. He was a complex man, reserved but kind, and Nora was beginning to suspect that her interest in him extended beyond gratitude for his assistance. Such thoughts were inappropriate, she reminded herself sternly. Her intended husband had been dead less than a fortnight. Besides, Isaac had shown no sign of seeing her as anything other than a responsibility, a neighbor in need of help. That evening, after returning to the Yates ranch, Nora was surprised to find Mrs. Donovan in a state of excited preparation. "There you are, Miss Vance. I was hoping you'd return in time to freshen up before the guests arrive." "Guests?" Nora questioned, glancing at Isaac, who looked equally puzzled. "Why, yes. Reverend and Mrs. Patterson are coming for supper, along with their daughter Lucinda. The Reverend mentioned it to me at church on Sunday, and I assumed Mr. Yates had informed you." Mrs. Donovan gave her employer an exasperated look. "Did you forget, sir?" Isaac ran a hand through his hair in a gesture Nora had come to recognize as discomfort. "I might have. Things have been busy." "Well, they'll be here in an hour, so you'd best get cleaned up, both of you." Mrs. Donovan shooed them toward the stairs. "Miss Vance, I've laid out hot water in your room." Once upstairs, Nora quickly washed and changed into her best dress, a deep blue cotton with modest white trim. She pinned her hair up more carefully than usual and added a simple cameo brooch that had belonged to her mother. When she descended the stairs, she found Isaac waiting in the parlor, dressed in a clean shirt and waistcoat, his usually unruly hair slicked down with water. He looked up at her approach, and something in his expression made her pause on the last step. "You look lovely, Miss Vance," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Thank you, Mr. Yates. You clean up rather well yourself." The words came out more flirtatiously than she'd intended, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. Before Isaac could respond, there was a knock at the door, and Mrs. Donovan hurried to answer it. The Pattersons proved to be a pleasant family, the Reverend, a thoughtful man in his 50s. His wife, a cheerful woman who immediately took Nora under her wing, and their daughter Lucinda, a pretty girl of about 19 with bright eyes and a quick laugh. "We've been so eager to meet you, Miss Vance," Mrs. Patterson said as they settled in the dining room. "When we heard about poor Mr. Payton and your arrival, we wanted to welcome you properly to Independence." "That's very kind of you," Nora replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Independence is small, but we look after our own," Reverend Patterson added. "We're pleased that Mr. Yates has offered you hospitality during this difficult time." Throughout the meal, Nora couldn't help but notice the way Lucinda Patterson directed much of her conversation toward Isaac, who responded politely, but without particular enthusiasm. It was clear that the young woman harbored some interest in the rancher, and equally clear that her parents approved of the potential match. The realization caused an unexpected pang of something that felt uncomfortably like jealousy. Lucinda was pretty, well-mannered, and clearly a part of the community. She would make a suitable wife for a man of Isaac's standing. The thought left a bitter taste in Nora's mouth, and she chided herself for it. She had no claim on Isaac Yates's affections, nor any right to feel displeasure at the idea of his marrying. "Miss Vance," Reverend Patterson's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Mrs. Donovan tells us you were a skilled seamstress in Boston. We've been without a proper dressmaker in Independence since Mrs. Fleming moved to Helena last year. Perhaps you might consider opening a shop here." The suggestion caught Nora by surprise. "I hadn't thought of that. I've been focused on learning about the ranch." "The church ladies would keep you busy with orders, I can assure you," Mrs. Patterson said enthusiastically. "And with the new families moving in with the railroad, there's a growing need." "It's worth considering," Nora agreed, her mind already calculating what such an enterprise might require. Of course, managing a ranch is a full-time occupation, Reverend Patterson noted. Few women undertake such a responsibility alone. My sister Ruth runs her own ranch down near Bozeman, Isaac interjected mildly. She's doing quite well. With her husband's help, I presume, Mrs. Patterson said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Actually, Thomas is a schoolteacher, Isaac corrected. Ruth handles the ranch work, always had a better head for it than her husband. Nora felt a rush of gratitude for his support. I haven't decided what to do with the property yet. I'm still learning what options might be viable. After supper, while the others retired to the parlor for coffee, Nora slipped outside for a breath of fresh air. The evening was cool but pleasant, with a full moon illuminating the yard and outbuildings. Too many people. Isaac's voice came from behind her, and she turned to find him approaching from the house. A bit. They're lovely, but I'm not accustomed to so much interest in my affairs. He joined her at the porch, railing. Small town curiosity. It'll pass once you're no longer the newest arrival. Lucinda seems quite taken with you, Nora observed, immediately regretting the comment. Isaac glanced at her sharply. Lucinda is a nice girl, but she's barely more than a child. She's 19, hardly a child, and clearly her parents approve. Her parents have been trying to match her with eligible bachelors since she turned 16, he said dryly. I've been dodging their efforts for nearly a year now. Relief washed through Nora, followed by embarrassment at her transparency. I see. I didn't mean to pry. You weren't prying. He turned to face her more directly. Miss Vance, Nora, I want you to know that my assistance these past days has come with no expectations. I've enjoyed teaching you about ranching, but whatever decision you make about your future, it should be yours alone. His use of her first name startled her almost as much as the sincerity in his voice. I appreciate that, Isaac. His given name felt intimate on her tongue. But I do value your counsel. You've been nothing but kind since my arrival. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. It's easy to be kind to someone like you. Before she could respond, the door opened behind them and Lucinda stepped onto the porch. Oh, there you are. Mother was wondering if you'd like some pie, Miss Vance. That sounds lovely, Nora replied, stepping away from Isaac with a strange reluctance. I was just getting some air. It is a beautiful night, Lucinda agreed, though her eyes lingered on Isaac rather than the star-filled sky. Mr. Yates, Father was hoping to discuss the church fundraiser with you. Of course, he said, holding the door for both women to precede him back inside. As they rejoined the gathering, Nora caught Mrs. Patterson watching her with a calculating expression that suggested the older woman had observed more than Nora might wish. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly enough, though Nora was relieved when the Pattersons finally took their leave. A lovely family, Mrs. Donovan commented as she cleared away the coffee cups. Though Mrs. Patterson does like to manage everyone's business as if it were her own. Isaac chuckled at the housekeeper's assessment. That she does. She seemed quite intent on promoting her daughter's interests this evening, Mrs. Donovan continued, giving Isaac a meaningful look. Lucinda deserves a young man who's smitten with her, Isaac replied evenly. I'm not that man. Mrs. Donovan's gaze flicked briefly to Nora before returning to her employer. Indeed, sir. Well, I'll finish tidying up and then retire. Good night to you both. After she left, an awkward silence fell between Nora and Isaac. I should turn in as well, Nora said finally. Thank you for including me this evening. You're part of the household now, he said simply. Good night, Nora. Good night, Isaac. As she climbed the stairs, Nora reflected on how quickly her circumstances had changed. A week ago, she had been journeying to marry a stranger. Now that stranger was gone, and she found herself drawn to a different man entirely, one who had shown her nothing but respect and kindness, yet who remained something of a mystery to her. The following morning, Nora woke with a sense of purpose. After breakfast, she asked Isaac if they might visit the lawyer again. "I've been thinking about what Reverend Patterson said about a dressmaking shop," she explained. "I'd like to understand my financial position better before making any decisions." "Of course," Isaac agreed. "I need to stop by the general store anyway." In town, while Isaac conducted his business, Nora met with Theodore Hargrove, who provided a detailed accounting of Elijah Payton's estate. "As you can see, Miss Vance, Mr. Payton was not wealthy, but he was solvent. The ranch is free of debt, and there's a small sum in the bank, about $300. The cattle and horses represent additional assets, of course." Nora studied the figures carefully. "And the property itself, what might it be worth if sold?" "Given its water rights and improvements, I'd estimate between $800 and $1,000. Land values are increasing with the railroad's arrival." It was a substantial sum, enough to establish herself comfortably back east or to start a business in Independence. Yet the thought of selling the ranch filled Nora with an unexpected reluctance. "Thank you, Mr. Hargrove. This is very helpful." After leaving the lawyer's office, Nora walked to the general store to find Isaac. As she approached, she heard raised voices from inside. "You'd best watch yourself, Yates." The speaker was a large man with a florid face and an expensive-looking suit that strained across his ample middle. "That land will be mine one way or another." "The lady has other ideas, Caldwell." Isaac's voice was calm but firm. "And it's not for sale." "Every piece of property between here and the creek will be mine," Caldwell insisted. "I've bought out 5 ranches already. One more won't make a difference to anyone but you and that mail-order bride who never even met her groom." Nora stepped into the store, anger flaring at the man's dismissive tone. "Actually, sir, it would make a difference to me." Both men turned to face her, surprise evident on their faces. "Miss Vance," Isaac acknowledged her with a nod. "And you must be Mr. Caldwell," Nora continued, her voice level despite her indignation. "I understand you're interested in purchasing property." Caldwell recovered quickly, a false smile spreading across his face as he removed his hat. "Victor Caldwell, at your service, madam. And yes, I've made a hobby of acquiring promising land in the area." "How interesting. I've recently acquired some property myself, though not as a hobby. It represents my future." "A woman alone has limited prospects for managing a ranch, Miss Vance," Caldwell said with feigned concern. "I'd be happy to relieve you of that burden for a fair price." "How generous," Nora replied coolly. "However, I'm not currently interested in selling." "Good day, Mr. Caldwell." She turned to Isaac. "Are you ready to depart, Mr. Yates? I've concluded my business with Mr. Hargrove." Isaac's eyes held a glimmer of admiration as he collected his purchases. "Ready when you are, Miss Vance." Caldwell's face hardened as they moved to leave. "You'll change your mind, miss. That land's not worth the trouble it'll bring you." Something in his tone made Nora pause. "Is that a warning, Mr. Caldwell? Take it however you like." He adjusted his expensive waistcoat. "But ranching is a dangerous business. Accidents happen. Ask your intended—" "Oh wait, you can't." His smile didn't reach his cold eyes. Isaac stepped forward, his posture suddenly menacing despite his quiet tone. "That's enough, Caldwell. Miss Vance is under my protection. Remember that." An ugly expression crossed Caldwell's face before he composed himself. "Always the hero, aren't you, Yates? We'll see how long that lasts." Outside, once they were in the buggy and away from eavesdropping ears, Nora turned to Isaac. "What was that about? Who is Victor Caldwell?" Isaac's jaw was tight with barely contained anger. "Cattle baron from back east. Moved here 2 years ago and started buying up land along the creek. Wants to control all the water rights in the valley. And Elijah refused to sell to him, repeatedly. Caldwell doesn't take rejection well. A chill ran through Nora as she considered the implications. You don't think? Elijah's death. Isaac's expression grew troubled. The doctor said it was influenza. Half the town was sick that week. But you have doubts. I have. Concerns, he admitted. Especially now hearing Caldwell speak that way to you. He threatened me, Nora said, the realization settling heavily. Rather directly, in fact. Yes, he did. Isaac's hands tightened on the reins. And that's why you'll not be staying at the Payton Ranch alone. Not until I'm certain Caldwell is just blowing hot air. Nora wanted to protest that she could take care of herself, but prudence won out. If Caldwell was dangerous enough to worry someone like Isaac Yates, his threats should not be taken lightly. What does he want with the land? There are larger ranches than Elijah's. Location, Isaac explained. Elijah's property, your property, sits at a crucial point where the creek narrows. Whoever controls that controls water access for half the valley. Elijah knew it, which is why he refused to sell no matter what Caldwell offered. And your ranch, is it also valuable to Caldwell? My water comes from a different source, springs on my own property. But I've stood with the other ranchers against Caldwell's attempts to monopolize the creek. He hasn't forgiven that. As they rode back toward the Yates ranch, Nora's mind raced with this new information. What had seemed a straightforward decision about her future now carried additional complications and possibly danger. I won't be intimidated into selling, she said finally. If Elijah protected that land for the good of others, I won't undo his work. Isaac studied her with an expression she couldn't quite read. That's a brave stance, Nora, but it could make you enemies. I'm discovering that standing up for oneself often does. She met his gaze steadily. Fortunately, I appear to have at least one friend in this situation. His eyes softened. More than one. The smaller ranchers in the valley will stand with you, just as they stood with Elijah. That evening, Nora sat on the porch long after supper, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. The encounter with Caldwell had shaken her more than she cared to admit, bringing home the reality of her situation in a way that theoretical discussions of ranch management had not. She heard the door open behind her and knew, without turning, that it was Isaac. Beautiful night, he commented, settling into the chair beside her. It is. So different from Boston. There, the buildings and gas lamps hide most of the stars. One of the things I love about Montana, the sky seems endless. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, an occasional owl hooting in the distance. I've been thinking about what happened today, Nora said finally. Caldwell, yes, and about my options. She turned to face him. I could sell the ranch and use the money to start a dressmaking business here in Independence. It would be the sensible choice. It would, he agreed, though she noted he didn't urge her toward that option. Or I could keep the ranch and learn to manage it. That seems like the less sensible path, especially given Caldwell's hostility. What does your heart tell you? The question surprised her. My heart? I'm not sure heart should enter into practical decisions. Perhaps not, he conceded. But I've found that decisions made solely with the head often leave something wanting. Nora considered this. My heart is confused. I came here to be a wife, to build a life with someone. Instead, I find myself alone with property I don't fully understand and a neighbor who seems determined to acquire it by any means necessary. You're not alone, Isaac said quietly. Not unless you choose to be. Their eyes met in the dim light of the porch lantern, and Nora felt something shift between them, a recognition of feelings that had been building since her arrival. Isaac. The sound of hoofbeats interrupted whatever she might have said. Both of them stood as a rider approached at speed, pulling up sharply at the porch steps. Mr. Yates. It was Billy Two Eagles, his usually calm demeanor replaced with urgent concern. Fire at the Payton place. Started in the barn. I saw it from the ridge and rode straight here. Isaac was already moving. Saddle my horse and yours, he called to Billy, and wake Cooper in the hands. We'll need help. He turned to Nora. Stay here with Mrs. Donovan. We'll handle this. No, Nora said firmly. It's my property. I'm coming. He looked like he might argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him it would be futile. Fine, but you stay well back from the fire. Promise me. I promise. Within minutes, they were galloping toward the Payton ranch, Nora on Daisy, Isaac and Billy on their faster mounts. Even from a distance, they could see the orange glow against the night sky. As they drew closer, the smell of smoke filled the air, and Nora could hear the terrified whinnies of horses. The barn was fully engulfed in flames, the heat intense even from where they reined in their mounts. Several of Elijah's horses had broken free and were milling nervously in the pasture, but at least one, judging by the sounds, remained trapped inside. The mare, Billy said grimly. She's in the back stall. Without hesitation, Isaac dismounted and handed his reins to Nora. Keep the horses back. The fire could spook them. Isaac, no, Nora protested. It's too dangerous. Can't leave her to burn, he replied, and before Nora could argue further, he sprinted toward the barn, using his coat to shield his face from the heat. Nora watched in horror as he disappeared into the inferno. Seconds stretched into an eternity as she waited, clutching the reins of their horses with white-knuckled hands. Come on, she whispered. Come on, Isaac. Just as she was certain he must have been overcome by smoke, a figure emerged from the barn, leading a terrified horse. Isaac and the mare staggered away from the building, both coughing and scorched but alive. Billy rushed forward to take the mare's halter, leading the trembling animal to join the others in the pasture. Nora ran to Isaac, who had dropped to his knees, coughing violently. You fool, she said, tears streaking her smoke-stained face. You could have been killed. He looked up at her, his face blackened with soot except for tracks where sweat had run down his cheeks. Couldn't let her die. The sound of more riders approaching announced the arrival of Cooper and 3 other ranch hands from the Yates property. They quickly organized a bucket line from the well to try to prevent the fire from spreading to the cabin, but it was clear the barn was lost. This was deliberate, Cooper said grimly as he joined Nora and Isaac. Fire started in at least 2 places, and look. He held up a broken lantern with a rag stuffed into the base. Someone wanted to make it look like an accident, but they left evidence. Caldwell, Isaac said, his voice rough from smoke. Can't prove it, Cooper replied, but I'd bet my last dollar on it. As dawn broke, the barn was nothing but smoldering ruins. The cabin had been saved, though its nearest wall was scorched and several windows had cracked from the heat. The horses were safe in the pasture, thanks to Isaac's bravery, but the stored hay, tack, and tools were all destroyed. Nora stood surveying the damage, exhaustion and anger warring within her. This was more than property damage. It was a message. Caldwell was showing her what happened to those who defied him. We should report this to the sheriff, she said to Isaac, who stood beside her, his shirt still stained with smoke. We will, he agreed. But Wells is Caldwell's cousin. Don't expect much action. Then we'll take it to the territorial marshal. That takes time. Meanwhile, we need to secure what's left and make plans to rebuild. He glanced at her. If that's what you want. Nora straightened her shoulders. That's exactly what I want. I won't be driven off my land by threats or fire. A smile touched Isaac's tired face. I had a feeling you might say that. The following days were a flurry of activity. True to Isaac's prediction, Sheriff Wells took statements about the fire but seemed skeptical of any connection to Caldwell, despite the clear evidence of arson. Nora insisted on filing a formal complaint anyway, which Isaac supported by riding to the next town to send a telegram to the territorial marshal's office. Meanwhile, ranchers from throughout the valley arrived to help clear the burned remains of the barn and begin construction of a new one. Nora was touched by their generosity and solidarity. "Caldwell's made enemies of most folks around here," explained Henry Morin, an older rancher whose property bordered Isaac's on the east. "We stick together against the likes of him." "I'm grateful," Nora told him. "I'm still learning what it means to be part of this community." "You're Elijah's chosen," Morin said simply. "That makes you one of us." As the new barn began to take shape, Nora divided her time between helping with the reconstruction and learning more about the ranch operations. Isaac was a patient teacher, explaining the seasonal cycles of cattle ranching, the importance of proper grazing rotation, and the economics of the beef market. "You have a good mind for business," he commented one afternoon as they reviewed the ledgers Elijah had kept. "These figures make sense to you." "Numbers always came easily to me," she admitted. "My father was an accountant before he died. He taught me the basics when I was young. It's a valuable skill for a rancher. Many good stockmen have lost everything because they couldn't manage their books properly." Their days fell into a pattern mornings at the Payton Ranch, where Nora was now spending more time as the cabin was made secure again. Afternoons often at Isaac's property, where he showed her his more extensive operations, and evenings at the Yates house, where they would discuss the day's events over supper with Mrs. Donovan and occasionally Cooper. Through it all, Nora was increasingly aware of her growing feelings for Isaac. His quiet strength, his integrity, and his unwavering support had become essential to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Sometimes, she caught him watching her with an intensity that suggested he might feel the same. But propriety and the recent nature of Elijah's death kept them from speaking openly of such matters. 3 weeks after the fire, with the new barn nearly complete, Nora rode to town alone for the first time. She had errands to run and wanted to inquire at the general store about the possibility of ordering dressmaking supplies. She had decided to keep the ranch but thought she might establish a small dressmaking business as well, working from the cabin when ranch duties permitted. As she tied her horse outside the general store, she was startled by a voice behind her. "Miss Vance, a pleasure to see you in town." She turned to find Victor Caldwell standing there, looking as prosperous and smug as he had during their first encounter. "Mr. Caldwell," she acknowledged coolly. "I wish I could say the same," he chuckled, apparently amused by her hostility. "Such spirit, it's admirable if misplaced. I understand you've had some unfortunate luck with your property. A fire, wasn't it?" The brazenness of his implied admission stoked her anger. "Not luck, Mr. Caldwell, arson, as I believe you're well aware." "A serious accusation," he replied, his smile never faltering. "And entirely without proof. Accidents happen in ranch country, especially when properties are neglected." "My property is far from neglected," Nora retorted. "And if you think intimidation will convince me to sell, you're sorely mistaken." Caldwell stepped closer, his voice dropping to ensure they wouldn't be overheard by passers-by. "Miss Vance, I'm a patient man, but my patience has limits. That land will be mine one way or another. The only question is how difficult you wish to make things for yourself and for those who support you." The threat against Isaac was unmistakable, and it chilled Nora to the bone. Still, she refused to show fear. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Caldwell?" "Merely stating facts," he replied smoothly. Yates has been a thorn in my side for too long. It would be a shame if his interference in my business resulted in consequences. If anything happens to Isaac Yates, Nora said, her voice low and fierce, I will ensure that everyone in the territory knows exactly who was responsible. Caldwell's smile finally faltered. You're making a mistake aligning yourself with him, Miss Vance. There are things about Yates you don't know. I know enough, she replied. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have business to attend to. She brushed past him and entered the store, heart pounding with anger and fear. What had Caldwell meant about things she didn't know? Was he simply trying to create doubt, or was there something about Isaac's past that he hadn't shared with her? After completing her errands, Nora rode back to the Payton ranch, her mind troubled by the encounter. As she approached, she saw Isaac's horse tethered outside the cabin. He emerged onto the porch as she dismounted, his expression concerned. You went to town alone, he said, and there was something like hurt in his voice. I would have accompanied you. I needed to prove to myself that I could manage it, she replied, avoiding his eyes as she secured her horse. Besides, you were busy with the cattle drive preparations. Nora, he came down the steps toward her. What's wrong? Something happened in town. She hesitated, then sighed. I encountered Caldwell. Isaac's face hardened. Did he threaten you again? Yes, but not just me. She met his gaze directly now. He threatened you, Isaac, said there would be consequences for your interference. I'm not concerned about Caldwell's threats, Isaac said dismissively. The man's a bully, nothing more. He also implied there were things about you that I don't know. Nora hated herself for asking, for showing doubt, but Caldwell's words had planted a seed of uncertainty. He was trying to drive a wedge between us, I'm sure, but you're wondering if there's truth to it, Isaac finished for her, his expression unreadable. I trust you, she said quickly. But I also recognize that we've known each other only a short time. Isaac was silent for a long moment, then nodded toward the cabin. Come inside. There are things I should have told you before now. Inside, they sat at the small table where they had shared many meals during the reconstruction efforts. Isaac's face was grave as he considered his words. Before I came to Montana, I was a different man, he began. After the war, I drifted. Worked as a hired gun for a cattle outfit in Wyoming. A hired gun, Nora repeated, trying to reconcile this information with the man she knew. Not an assassin, he clarified, but I was paid to protect the herd and the rancher's interests. There were conflicts with other outfits. Men died. He met her gaze steadily. I killed men, Nora, in defense of my employer and myself, but I took lives nonetheless. Nora absorbed this revelation. Is that what Caldwell meant, that you have a violent past? Partly. There's more. Isaac's hands, usually so steady, fidgeted with the edge of the table. The rancher I worked for, Harlan Briggs, was similar to Caldwell in many ways. Ruthless. Willing to do whatever it took to expand his holdings. I didn't fully understand that when I hired on. What happened? Briggs ordered us to run a family off their land. Small homesteaders, no threat to anyone. He claimed they were squatting on his range, but it was a lie. They had legitimate claim to the property. Isaac's voice grew tight with old pain. When the father refused to leave, one of the other men, not me, shot him, right in front of his wife and children. Nora's hand flew to her mouth in horror. I didn't pull the trigger, Isaac continued, but I was there. I was part of it. After, I couldn't live with myself. I testified against Briggs and his men, helped bring them to justice. Then I left Wyoming, changed my name, and came here to start fresh. Changed your name? This was unexpected. Then Isaac Yates isn't. Isaac is my given name, he assured her. Yates was my mother's maiden name. I was born Isaac Thornton. Nora sat back, processing everything he'd revealed. Does anyone here know this? Cooper knows. Mrs. Donovan. A few others. It's not a secret I keep strictly, just a past I don't discuss openly. And Caldwell, how does he know? He has connections in Wyoming. Probably investigated me when I opposed his water rights grab. Isaac's expression was resigned. Now you understand why his threats don't frighten me much. I've faced worse men than Victor Caldwell. Nora considered all she'd learned. Isaac had participated in terrible things, yes, but he had also sought redemption. He had built a new life based on honor and hard work. She knew the man who had rescued a mare from a burning barn, who taught her about ranching with endless patience, who had opened his home to her when she was a stranger. That was the true Isaac. Thank you for telling me, she said finally. It can't have been easy to speak of such things. I should have told you sooner, he replied. Especially after Caldwell began making threats. You deserved to know who was standing beside you. I know who you are, Isaac. She reached across the table and took his hand, a boldness that surprised even her. You're the man who has shown me nothing but kindness and respect since the moment I arrived. You're the man who risked his life to save a horse from a burning barn. You're the man who has taught me that I'm capable of more than I ever imagined. His fingers tightened around hers. Nora, a sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Isaac released her hand reluctantly and rose to answer. It was Cooper, his expression urgent. Riders coming from town, he reported. 6 of them, look like Caldwell's men. Isaac's face hardened. Get back to the ranch. Bring Billy and as many hands as you can spare. We may need them. As Cooper rode off, Isaac turned to Nora. Stay inside. No matter what happens, stay in the cabin. Isaac, please, Nora. I can't focus if I'm worried about you being in the line of fire. She nodded reluctantly, and he strode out, closing the door firmly behind him. Through the window, she watched him walk to the center of the yard, standing tall and unafraid as the riders approached. The men reined in a short distance away, their leader a lanky man with a pockmarked face that Nora recognized as one of Caldwell's foremen. Yates, the man called. We got business with the lady of the house. Miss Vance isn't receiving visitors, Isaac replied, his voice carrying easily in the still air. Whatever business you have can wait for another day. Afraid that won't do, the foreman drawled. Mr. Caldwell's tired of waiting. He sent us to escort the lady to town to discuss terms of sale. Escort? Isaac's tone was dangerously calm. Sounds more like abduction to me. Call it what you want. She's coming with us one way or another. Nora had heard enough. Despite Isaac's instruction to stay inside, she opened the door and stepped onto the porch. I'm right here, gentlemen. And I have no intention of going anywhere with you. The foreman's eyes narrowed. This ain't a request, madam. Mr. Caldwell's been patient, but that patience is used up. Get back inside, Nora, Isaac said without turning. No, she replied firmly, descending the steps to stand beside him. This is my property, my fight, the foreman sneered. Ain't going to be much of a fight, 6 of us, 2 of you, and one of you's a woman. You're forgetting something, Isaac said. I'm not just any man. There was something in his voice that made the foreman hesitate, a cold certainty that sent a chill through the air. For the first time, Nora glimpsed the dangerous man Isaac had once been, the hired gun whose reputation still lingered. Now, Isaac continued, you boys have a choice. You can turn around and ride back to Caldwell with your tails between your legs, or you can try to take the lady by force. But I promise you this, if you choose the second option, not all of you will leave here alive. A tense silence followed his words. The men shifted uneasily in their saddles, exchanging glances. It was clear they hadn't expected such resistance. Caldwell ain't gonna like this, the foreman muttered. Caldwell isn't here, Isaac pointed out. You are, and you're making a decision that might cost you your life. Think carefully." Before the foreman could respond, the sound of approaching riders drew everyone's attention. Cooper was returning, accompanied by Billy and 4 other ranch hands, all armed. The odds had shifted dramatically, and the foreman knew it. "This ain't over, Yates. Not by a long shot." "Yes, it is," came a new voice, and everyone turned to see Theodore Hargrove riding up, accompanied by a stern-looking man in a marshal's badge. "Marshal Wilson has some questions for Mr. Caldwell and his men regarding certain recent events." The marshal surveyed the scene with experienced eyes. "I received complaints about intimidation, arson, and now what appears to be an attempted abduction." He focused on the foreman. "Mr. Lacey, isn't it? You and your men can either come with me peacefully to answer some questions, or you can resist and face additional charges. Your choice." Lacey's face contorted with anger, but he was smart enough to recognize defeat. "We'll come peaceful, Marshal. We ain't done nothing wrong." As the marshal escorted Caldwell's men away, with Cooper and the other hands following to ensure they left the property, Hargrove approached Nora and Isaac. "I took the liberty of contacting the territorial marshal after our conversation about the fire, Miss Vance," the lawyer explained. "Fortunately, Marshal Wilson was already in the area investigating other complaints against Caldwell." "Thank you, Mr. Hargrove," Nora said sincerely. "Your timing couldn't have been better." "Indeed." Hargrove glanced between her and Isaac with a knowing look. "Well, I should join the marshal. There will be statements to take, paperwork to file. Good day to you both." After everyone had departed, Nora and Isaac stood alone in the yard, the tension of the confrontation slowly dissipating. "You should have stayed inside," Isaac said quietly. "I couldn't let you face them alone. I can handle men like that. I know you can." She turned to face him fully. "But that's not the point, Isaac. We're in this together now. Whatever happens, we face it together." Something in his expression shifted, a vulnerability breaking through his careful control. "Nora, when I saw you step onto that porch, I was terrified. Not of Caldwell's men, but of losing you before I ever truly had you." Her heart quickened at his words. "What are you saying, Isaac?" "I'm saying that I love you." The declaration was simple, direct, like the man himself. "I know it's too soon. I know you came here to marry another man. I know my past makes me unworthy of someone like you, but I can't keep it inside any longer." Nora reached up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his weathered cheek. "It's not too soon. Not when you know in your heart that it's right." She took a deep breath. "I love you too, Isaac. I think I have since that first day at the train station when you offered me shelter and respect when I had nowhere else to turn." He covered her hand with his own, turning to press a kiss into her palm. "I never expected to find love again, especially not like this." "Neither did I," she admitted. "But perhaps that's how love often comes, when we least expect it, but most need it." Isaac drew her closer, his arms encircling her with a gentleness that belied their strength. "May I kiss you, Nora Vance?" "Please," she whispered, and then his lips were on hers, tender at first, then with growing passion as she responded eagerly to his touch. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I want to court you properly. No rushing, no pressure. You deserve that." Nora smiled up at him. "I would like that very much." The following weeks brought significant changes to Independence. Marshal Wilson's investigation into Caldwell's activities revealed a pattern of intimidation, fraud, and violence that extended beyond his dealings with Nora and Isaac. Several ranchers came forward with similar stories, and evidence emerged linking Caldwell directly to the barn fire. Charges were filed, and Caldwell was taken to Helena to stand trial. Without their employer's protection, his men quickly scattered, many leaving the territory entirely rather than face potential prosecution. Meanwhile, Nora settled into life at the Payton Ranch, which she had decided definitively to keep. With Isaac's guidance and the help of the neighboring ranchers, she was learning the business of cattle raising with remarkable aptitude. True to his word, Isaac courted her, properly riding over each morning to help with ranch work, taking her to church on Sundays, and escorting her to the occasional social events in Independence. Their growing relationship was the subject of much good-natured gossip in town, though a few, like Mrs. Patterson, sniffed disapprovingly at the speed with which the mail-order bride had transferred her affections. "Let them talk," Nora told Isaac one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset. "They didn't lose what they came for and find something unexpected and wonderful instead." "Something wonderful indeed," he agreed, taking her hand. "Nora, there's something I want to discuss with you." His serious tone made her heart flutter nervously. "What is it?" "The Payton Ranch is doing well under your management, but it's small, limited. My property is considerably larger with more potential for growth." "Are you suggesting I sell after all?" she asked, confused. "No," he smiled, squeezing her hand. "I'm suggesting a merger." "A merger?" Isaac slid from the porch swing onto one knee before her, still holding her hand. "Nora Vance, I love you with all that I am. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Of joining our lives, our lands, and our futures together?" Joy burst through her like the first light of dawn. "Yes, Isaac. Yes, I will marry you." He slipped a ring onto her finger, a simple gold band with a small, perfect diamond that caught the last rays of the setting sun. "It was my mother's," he explained. "The one thing I kept from my old life." "It's beautiful," she whispered, then pulled him up to join her on the swing, kissing him with all the love in her heart. They were married in the small church in Independence on a perfect autumn day, with the aspens turning gold against the blue Montana sky. Reverend Patterson performed the ceremony, having overcome his initial reservations about their match when it became clear that their love was genuine and lasting. Mrs. Donovan wept openly, while Cooper and Billy stood as witnesses, both grinning broadly at the union of two people they had come to respect deeply. After the ceremony, as they greeted well-wishers outside the church, Theodore Hargrove approached them with a small package. "A wedding gift," he explained, "though not from me." Elijah Payton left this with instructions that it be given to his bride upon her marriage, whether to him or, as he put it, to whatever fortunate man might win her heart if I am not there to do so. With trembling fingers, Nora unwrapped the package to find a small book bound in soft leather. Inside, written in a careful hand, was a collection of poems and thoughts about love, loss, and finding hope again. On the first page was an inscription: "To my intended bride, may you find the happiness you deserve, whether with me or another. Life is too short and precious to waste in mourning what might have been. Love deeply, laugh often, and know that my greatest wish is for your joy." With fondness, Elijah Payton tears filled Nora's eyes as she showed the inscription to Isaac. "He knew," she whispered. "Somehow he knew." "He was a wise man," Isaac said, his arm around her waist. "And I will be forever grateful to him for bringing you to Montana, even if it was for himself." Their life together unfolded with the changing seasons of the Montana landscape. They made their home primarily at the larger Yates Ranch, but maintained the Payton property as well, eventually converting the cabin into a schoolhouse for the growing number of children in the valley. Nora did establish her dressmaking business, working from a small shop in town 2 days a week, while continuing to help manage their expanding cattle operation. Her reputation for fine workmanship spread throughout the territory, bringing in a steady income that they reinvested in the ranch. In the spring of 1878, their first child was born, a son they named Thomas Elijah Yates, in honor of both Isaac's father and the man whose last act of kindness had ultimately brought them together. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah Ruth, named for the women who had meant so much to them both. Independence grew with the railroad, but never lost its frontier character. Isaac served on the town council for several terms, helping to guide the community's development with wisdom gained from hard experience. Nora established a lending library in her former dressmaking shop, believing as strongly as her husband in the importance of education and opportunity for all. Victor Caldwell was convicted of multiple crimes and sentenced to prison in Helena. The land he had amassed was sold at auction, much of it returning to the original owners or their heirs at fair prices. The water rights to the creek were established as shared resources, protected by legal covenants that Isaac helped draft to ensure no single entity could ever again threaten the livelihoods of the valley's residents. On the 10th anniversary of her arrival in Montana, Nora stood on the porch of their home, watching Isaac teach 7-year-old Thomas to rope a calf in the corral nearby. Sarah played with her dolls at Nora's feet, occasionally looking up to cheer her brother's efforts. The life she had found here was nothing like the one she had imagined when she'd boarded that eastbound train in Boston a decade earlier. It was harder in many ways, the work never ending, the challenges of frontier life constant but richer and more fulfilling than she could have dreamed. Isaac looked up, catching her gaze across the yard. Even after all these years, that simple connection still sent a thrill through her. He said something to Thomas, then walked toward the porch, his smile warming as he approached. "What are you thinking about so intently, Mrs. Yates?" he asked, climbing the steps to join her. "About fate," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "About how sometimes the most devastating disappointments lead us to our greatest joys." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I thank God every day for bringing you to independence, even if it was for another man." "As do I," she agreed, turning in his arms to face him fully. "Though I think perhaps we were always meant to find each other one way or another. I believe you're right." He kissed her properly then, with all the passion of their first kiss and the depth of a decade's shared life. "I love you, Nora Yates, and I love you, Isaac Yates." She smiled up at him, her heart full. "Forever and always." As the sun began its descent toward the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the land they had built together, Nora knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. What had begun as a journey toward an unknown future with a stranger had become a life rich with love, purpose, and belonging, a different destination than she had planned, but infinitely more precious for being unexpected. In the wild heart of Montana, Nora Vance had arrived as a mail-order bride seeking security. She had found instead a partner, a purpose, and a love that would endure through all the seasons of their lives together.